Alright, yeah! Thank God for fantasy football. I'm Buster Brown, and the show is called Redemption Rehab. Today, we're talking about the rookie running backs coming in to this year's NFL Draft. We're going to show you some of their highlights, we're going to show you their stats, and we're going to show you where they're going to go in some of your upcoming Fantasy Football League drafts. So buckle up, get out your popcorn, and let's head over to the chalkboard
and check out the facts.
Okay, here we are on one of our favorite websites, drafttech.com. They're going to rank our running backs this year to show you who might impact fantasy football. It's an NFL draft preview show, and they're going to rank them based upon where they might go in this year's NFL draft this April. Starting with this guy, Trey Benson of Florida State. He's 6 foot, 221 pounds. He's the 52nd ranked player overall in this year's NFL draft, according to Draft Tech, and he's the number one running back on the board in mid-March of 2024, a month before the NFL draft. Let's check out his stats and highlights. Trey Benson played 4 years at Oregon, 2 years, Florida State for 2 years. When he went to the combine, he surprised everybody and ran a 4.39 in the 40-yard dash. In his 2 years at Florida State, he ran the ball 310 times for 1,896 yards. He scored 23 touchdowns. He had a 6-yard average per carry, and he managed to catch 33 receptions for 371 yards and 1 TD. He had an 11.2 yard average per catch. He averaged 12 attempts per game while at Florida State, managed to catch 1 ball every game. He averaged less than 1 touchdown per game. Questionable based upon those statistics, wasn't a very big workhorse, but the 4.39 in the 40-yard dash has NFL scouts wondering if this guy might not be the next good thing that hits the NFL. We've got some other running backs we want to take a look at, like this guy here. How about Blake Corum over at Michigan? Now, this guy was a real workhorse over there. He's 5'7", 210-pound senior. He's the 71st ranked overall player according to the drafttech.com. Let's take a look at some of his highlights. Like I said, Blake Corum, man, he's not very fast. He was 4.53 in the 40-yard dash at the combine, which is pretty average for a running back. He did manage to finish first in the bench press, which is really good because he's very strong at 27 reps. He played 4 years at Michigan, like I said, mostly the last 3 years. They did win a national championship in his last year at Michigan. He was a key player. In his time at Michigan, he had 675 attempts rushing for 3,737 yards with a whopping record at Michigan, 58 touchdowns. He had a 5.5 yard average per carry, and he managed to catch 56 receptions for 411 yards and another 3 TDs with a 7-yard average per reception. At his time at Michigan, he averaged 15 plus attempts per game for 83 yards per game, and he averaged 1.24 receptions per game, and he scored more than 1 touchdown per game on average. I'll tell you what, man, if you've watched this kid play over at Michigan, he is a workhorse. That's what he does. He wears people out. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he's just a really tough football player. Depending upon where he goes in the NFL draft is dependent upon where you're going to take him in your upcoming Fantasy Football League drafts. Another guy we really like who got hurt this year, unfortunately tore his ACL, was Jonathan Brooks out of Texas. Like I said, November, man, he tore his ACL, so he's looking at rehab. Might not be there for the beginning of the season, but that doesn't mean he's not a good football player. Eventually, he'll heal, and he'll get drafted. And let's take a look at him. He's 6 foot, 270-pound redshirt sophomore. Draft Tech has him ranked as the 73rd overall player. Had he not got hurt, he probably would have been the number 1 running back. Let's take a look at some of his highlights. Jonathan Brooks, like I said, pretty good running back, 6 foot, 207 pounds out of Texas. Played his first 2 years of his 3-year career behind Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons and Rashawn Johnson of the Chicago Bears. But in the 1 year at Texas, he had 187 attempts for 1,139 yards and 10 touchdowns. He had a 6.1 yard per average carry, and he can catch the ball. In those games that he played, he had 25 receptions for 286 yards with a 12-yard average, and he got another touchdown. He averaged 17 attempts per game for 103 yards per game. He had a 2.27 reception per game average, which is really good, meaning he's catching 2 or 3 balls a game, and he's averaging 1 touchdown per game also. If it wasn't for his, like I said, torn ACL, probably would have been drafted higher in the NFL. So we'll see where he goes and who takes him this year. These are your top 3 running backs. Everybody agrees. The running backs we're going to mention after this considered day 3 guys. Let's take a look and see where these first 3 guys are going in some of your fantasy football leagues before we continue with some of these other running backs. Okay, here you have a rookie mock draft of Dynasty League. And you can see here in this first round snake draft, and it's a 1 quarterback PPR league, Marvin Harrison's the first person going. He's a wide receiver out of Ohio State. And you don't see another running back going until you get to the end of the first round. And it's the guy we just talked about, Jonathan Brooks out of Texas. With the torn ACL, he's still going at the end of the first round in this 12-team league. So I told you, he's a pretty good running back. I would consider taking him too. I might want to wait until the second round, depending upon who takes him in the NFL draft. As you can see here, we're going to talk about Jalen Wright at the next pick. We talked about Trey Benson. You can see him going here in the second round. And Blake Corum going at the end of the third round. Let's go back, get some highlights of some of these other players so that you can see where players like Jalen Wright and Braylon Allen and Marshawn Lloyd, you can see their highlights, their statistics, and you might fall in love with them like I did. Okay, the next running back here on Draft Tech that they really like, Bucky Irvin. He's a smaller player at 5'9", 194-pound junior. Draft Tech has him ranked just below Jonathan Brooks at player number 77. Let's take a look at some of his stats and highlights. Bucky Irvin is a really good player. He was the most missed tackles in the NCAA, and he also ran over 330 routes out of the backfield, which is huge, and that's what everybody likes about this kid. He's a multi-dimensional player. He ran a 4.56 40 at the NFL Combine, which is pretty much average for a NFL running back. He played his first year at Minnesota. Then he transferred and played 2 years at Oregon. While he was at Oregon, he had 475 attempts for 2,937 yards, and he scored 20 touchdowns. He had a 6.2 yard average per carry. But what sets him apart, like I said, is the 95 receptions for 712 yards and another 5 TDs in his career with an 8.2 yard average per catch. In his last year, he caught 56 passes, and that's a big deal. His rushing attempts per game, he rushed the ball 75 yards per game in 3 years, and he had 2.5 catches per game per year. He's a pretty good player. We'll see how he holds up with that small frame in the NFL. We'll see who drafts him in the NFL, and later on, if you stick around, we'll show you where he's going in some of your redraft leagues the end of this video, so stick around and you'll be surprised. I really like Bucky Irvin. Another guy that's not getting the hype that I'm surprised Draft Tech has him this high is Will Shipley out of Clemson. He's 5'10", 205-pound junior, but he had a really good career because, like Bucky Irvin, man, he likes to catch the ball out of the backfield. Draft Tech has him ranked as their 81st overall player in this draft. They're expecting him to go at the end of that third round, maybe beginning of that fourth or fifth round of this year's NFL draft. Let's take a look at this kid on tape. Will Shipley out of Clemson, like I said, 5'10", 205-pound junior, played 3 years. He rushed the ball 526 times for 2,748 yards and a whopping 31 touchdowns. He had a 5.5 yard per carry average, but he managed to catch 85 receptions for 602 yards with another 2 TDs and a 7.5 yard average per catch. He only had a 76 yard average per game, but he did manage to catch 2.5 balls per game, which is why the NFL scouts like him. Another guy that I really like is this Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. Kid's 20 as we speak. So this year, later on this year, he'll turn 21 as an NFL pro. And he's 6'2", 235-pound junior. And Draft Tech has him ranked just out of the top 100 players at 103. But he had a really good career at Wisconsin, and he's a load, 235 pounds. And he bench pressed like the second most reps next to Blake Corum at the NFL Combine for running backs. I think he had like 26 reps. So he's a big, strong kid, and the NFL scouts really like him. Let's take a look at some of his tape. As you can see here, Braylon Allen, like I said, was 6'2", 235-pound junior. He played 3 years at Wisconsin. He's only 20, like I said, and that's really amazing. In his 3 years at Wisconsin, he had 597 attempts for 3,494 yards and 35 touchdowns. He had a 5.9 yard average per carry, and he had 49 receptions in his 3 years for 275 yards. He didn't get in the end zone, but he had a 5.6 yard average per catch. He averaged 100 yards per game while there at Wisconsin, and he caught 1.5 balls per game also. But, his freshman year was his big year. Everybody thought this kid was going to be something special. I think people were disappointed how he finished his career. But I'll tell you what, he still had an amazing career, and I like him a lot. It just depends on where he goes. And can he stay on the field for 3 or 4 downs? Another guy that was pretty impressive while at Notre Dame was this Audric Estime. I'll tell you right now, 6', 227-pound junior. Draft Tech has him ranked as the 114th overall player. He played well at Notre Dame behind Kyren Williams, and then he came into his own. Let's take a look at some of his tape. Audric Estime, like I said, 6', 225-pound junior, played 3 years at Notre Dame. He only had a 4.7 in the 40-yard dash. That's not very exciting. I'm sure NFL scouts are going to drop him a little bit because of that. He should really be in that 4.5 range. So his time there was slow. He did manage 373 attempts rushing for 2,321 yards. He had 29 TDs, and he did have a 6.2 yard average per carry. He managed to catch only 26 balls out of the backfield for 277 yards and another touchdown. It was a 10-yard average, however. He only averaged 62 yards a game also in his 3 years, and he only managed less than 1 reception per game. Actually, it was around 0.7. That's not very good. I'm not sure where he'll go. He's definitely going to get drafted on day 3 of the NFL in that, 5th, 6th, 7th round. It's really important you know where he goes because, hey, that's what we're doing here. We're trying to give you some ideas of guys you're going to see get taken in this year's NFL draft that'll impact fantasy football. So stick around. We're going to show you a couple more players, and then we're going to head over and check out where these guys are going in some of your fantasy league drafts. But before we go over there, you got to know who this guy is, Marshawn Lloyd over there out of USC. I mean, he played a few years at South Carolina too. He's 5'9", 210-pound redshirt junior. Draft Tech has him ranked inside their top 125 players. Let's go take a look at some of his highlights. Marshawn Lloyd had a pretty good 40-yard time. He was 4.46 in the 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. He was 3rd in the bench press at 25 reps among all the running backs, so he's very strong. He was a standout at the Senior Bowl. That's what the NFL scouts are at and coach those types of games. In 2024 Senior Bowl, he was basically one of the better players there. Let's take a look at some of his tape here. You can see he played 3 years at South Carolina before transferring to 1 year at USC. He did not play in his first year at South Carolina because he, like some of these other guys, tore their ACL. He did manage to recover. That may have affected him for a couple of years. In his career, he had 291 rushing attempts for 1,621 yards and 19 touchdowns. He had a 5.6 yard per carry average, and he only managed to catch 34 balls in his career for 452 yards and another 2 touchdowns. But he did have a 13-yard average per catch. He only averaged 50 yards per game rushing, which is low, and less than 1 reception per game. But in his senior year, he had a 17-yard average per catch. And like I said, had he not had a really good Senior Bowl type situation, especially he impressed everybody in practice and in the game. And that's why he's going to get drafted in the NFL on day 3. So keep an eye on Marshawn Lloyd. And the last guy we want to talk about that's not on this list is Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. You got to know who this guy is too, because he managed to pop 4.3 at the NFL Combine in the 40-yard dash. So he's rocketing up NFL draft boards. Let's take a look at this kid. Jalen Wright out of Tennessee played in 34 games. He had a 4.38 40-yard dash at the Combine. He's 5'11", 210 pounds. So he's just the right size out of Tennessee, where he played 3 years. He was a junior. He had 368 rushing attempts for 2,297 yards. He also had 18 TDs for a 6.2 yard average per carry. He managed to catch 30 balls also for another 171 yards for 5.7 average per catch. So, the NFL scouts really like this guy. We got to mention him to you because, he may show up on our fantasy radar later this year also. Let's take a look and see where these guys are going in some of your Dynasty League rookie drafts real quick. Okay, here's the graph I showed you earlier. As you can see, we talked about Jonathan Brooks going at the end of the first round. Next guy off the board is the guy I just talked about, Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. Troy Benson, Braylon Allen, Marshawn Lloyd, Blake Corum, and then you do the snake where you're getting down here in round 3. There's our Bucky Irvin, Will Shipley. I would keep an eye out for Ray Davis. He's being drafted right here, as you can see, right around Audric Estime. Ray Davis played 3 years at 3 different schools, had 1,000 yards at all 3 of them, including Kentucky. And he grew up in the foster system, so he works hard and he understands how much is on the line for him to do well. He's a great guy. Keep an eye on Ray Davis. And you can see some of the other guys that are on this board that are going to get drafted in some of your Dynasty Leagues later this year. Let's take a look at your redraft leagues real quick so you have an idea of where they're going in mid-March 2024. Okay, here's a redraft league we did just so you have an understanding. If you take a look at this entire board here, you're not going to see any rookie running backs being taken in all the way down to the end of round 9 in this 12-team league. And this is not considered a very good class of running backs. There are some wide receivers going, but there are no quarterbacks. You're not going to find Caleb Williams on there and Brock Bowers. Why? Because they all got drafted after round 9. Let's take a look and see where those guys are going. Okay, here we are back looking at the running backs coming into the NFL. And the first guy off the board is this guy here in round 10, Trey Benson. Like we said, fantasy players know their stuff, man. They're taking Trey Benson first. Next guy coming off the board is Blake Corum. We talked about him a few minutes ago. And then eventually you see over here, you see where Braylon Allen's going and some Jonathan Brooks is going there in round 13. And then you start to see other running backs going. And down at the end of this draft are all getting drafted in your redraft leagues. Okay, this is really important fact. Look at all the running backs that changed teams this year. So it's really going to affect those rookie running backs that we just talked about. Why? Because all these veteran running backs changed teams. And I'll tell you what, they're not in need of a running back. So it really hurt this class a lot. Anyways, that's it for our show this week on rookie running backs coming into the NFL draft. I'm Buster Brown. The show is called Redemption Rehab. Good luck.